Welcome back, my sales funnel sales masters and my DIS experts. Now we get to the C. The C stands for cautious or creative. And truly, and those of you that are C's out there, I don't want you to give me a lot of grief, but C's are the bane of salespeople. Why? Because they want tons of detail. They want to remove all emotion from the decision. They take a long time analyzing and analyzing and analyzing, and since most of us sellers are DI combinations, we want to hurry it along, and that's the greatest gap, if you will, of becoming the emotional twin of that individual. To a high C, I recall one time talking to a high C, and I said, tell me about your kids. And he said, what business is it of yours? Woof. And when I tell most salespeople that, they react, oh my God.
Yeah, and they said, what did you do?
And the guy actually ended up buying from me. And the reason is for him, it was just a point of information. High C's tend to be programmers. High C's are accountants, in charge of quality control, in charge of Six Sigma or Lean Six Sigma, if you will, whatever it might be. High attention to detail. Auditors. Anything that requires immense detail, high C's. In fact, his mother, my wife, nice combination, the fact that your mother is my
good.
wife. That's
I
good.
appreciate that.
That's good. Is 100% C. She will go into the office at 8 o'clock in the morning. She will stay there till 8 o'clock at night working on our global deals. So she sends out the invoices and the product lines and all the things that has to be done with our organization. She will stay there for 12 hours alone every day and not have a problem with it. Amazing. He or I would self-destruct. We would blow our brains out in 1 hour. That's what a high C can do. Critical thinker, conscientious, accurate, above reproach. Avoid criticizing their work. Asking highly personal questions like, tell me about your kids or this and that and the other. They don't, incomplete data. If you quote a statistic to a C, you better have your proof source ready. You can't say 82% of X buys this. That C is going to say, show me the report that validates what you just told me. Way back, I hate to tell you, over 40 years ago, I taught Fortran to scientists at the Atomic Energy Commission. And so I'm teaching them how to use software, believe it or not, way back then, how to use a computer program 40-some years ago. And there's 80 people in the room. They're all scientists. And here I am, Mr. DI. And it pays to be lucky every now and then. My favorite technique was called a concatenated expression. I'm going through the process of explaining these different modules to the scientists. And this high C in the back of the room, and he said, well, what about the concatenated expression? And I responded, that's on page 82 of your manual. Just like that. Why? Because I reviewed it the night before. I got lucky. I mean, that's probably the only page I reviewed. Luckily, but my credibility with that individual skyrocketed as a result of that. You quote a statistic, have your proof source. They want autonomy, professional development, freedom and personalization. D's and I's will buy on the first call. S's sometimes, C's never. C's never. They try and remove all emotion from the decision. The problem is C's tend to be in purchasing. And they care more, purchasing agents care more about you following the process than the actual result. So those of us that are in the B2B selling world have to, we call that the process owner. If we get stuck in purchasing, my joke has always been, that's where salespeople go to die. If you walk into a purchasing agent, you see a skeleton, that's a salesperson that was waiting for the okay to go forward on the contract. Have you ever had any of those, son?
Well, yeah, I'd say so. But it's, I'm always curious as to how you reserve yourself to not making any assumptions when you're this highly aware of DISC. Do you kind of use DISC as to play it safe and say, hey, this person's a C, maybe they are a procurement person that's going to block my decision making? I mean, how much do you weigh all this information in your presentation skills?
Absolutely. Well, that's, it may be in my presentation skills to a degree, but mostly in the overall strategy.
So in this research phase, this is the integral part of the heightened awareness.
Yes, and I want to make sure we're going to talk all during this course about strategy. I mean, about techniques. But they have to support a strategy. There's a strategy for a D. There's a strategy for an I. Then within each one of these, there's certain techniques we use to achieve that.
Okay.
But right now, we're talking about our own personal demeanor to match the personality style that's C. So when I'm talking to a C, I quote a lot of statistics, but I have those proof sources of those statistics. Going back to the swimming pool industry, I remember talking about, my territory was the Washington, D.C. Beltway area, Potomac, Maryland, the richest part of the country. And a lot of scientists were there. Remember a couple of PhDs in math that I was selling to. And I said, you'll save $20 a month in electricity based upon the way we design the hydraulic system. And the man said to me, well, what rate per kilowatt hour did you use for that calculation? And I actually had it. It was in my handout. Because for each county around the Beltway, there was a different rate per kilowatt hour. And the fact that I could refer to that statistic gave me validity. And conversely, you quote a statistic and you can't validate it, you've lost. How about this? People normally go 50 to 60%, or you'll see an improvement of 50 to 60. Well, which is it? That's what a C's thinking. What do you mean 50 to 60? Is it 50 or is it 60? Or don't you even know? Is that just your guess? All right.
I have a quick question, and I imagine some of the people watching this are thinking, how the heck do you have time to know all that? Or how do you even know all that information? You said, I'm not a born salesman, but you're putting all this stuff out there. I mean, I know, but how did you come to get that good at the specifics?
Know everything. Remember I said know everything? For over 40 years, I've read a book a week on average on sales, leadership, or human behavior. That's over 2,000 books on my chosen career. The average college graduate does not read one nonfiction book a year. That single habit has taken me light years above my competition. Know everything. I subscribe to the Harvard Business Review. I'm reading executive book summaries. When the engagement index became hot and first came out, I studied everything I could about engagement indexes. So I know the global average engagement index. I know which countries are better than others. So when I quote a statistic, you know that I have the proof source for that statistic. Give a nuts and bolts presentation, be organized and patient, back up every claim with facts and writing. They buy based on why this, and this is the key word, a logical decision for them to make, and generally it's the lowest risk. If you want the C to ever move forward, there must be a penalty for delay. Let me explain how I see things. The more time I have to analyze, the less chance I have making a mistake. Oh, by the way, remember, D's fear was loss of control. The high I's fear was being rejected. The high S fear was loss of security and stability. The high C's fear is making a mistake. So any decision runs the risk of being a mistake. So the longer I have to analyze, the less chance I have of making a mistake. If you want the C to move forward, the delay has to be the mistake. So you must create a penalty for delay. So if you say to somebody, I'm going to save you $10,000 a month, to a high C, you have to say, you're losing $10,000 every month you delay. And you need to use the Ben Franklin close, or what they call the balance sheet close, and simply say, okay, here's all the facts why this is something you should do. Here's some of the facts why you maybe shouldn't do it. And then you simply say this. The facts speak for themselves, that this is a logical decision for you to make. And they must nothing you, because you don't enter, you're the conduit for the data. You are not factoring into their decision. Very interesting, my friend. Understand what this profile you are. That influences how you sell. But way more important, because it doesn't matter what you are, you have to recognize the disc profile of the person you're trying to sell to, adapt your strategy to each one of those, and we'll talk about that more as we go through the entire process, because it influences every step of the sales process, and most salespeople do not do it. And if you don't do it, we talked about this at one of the breaks and segments, if you don't do this at home, you're never going to do it. You have to incorporate DISC into your life. I used it to have the perfect marriage. I use it to raise 3 incredible children. I use it for my career. So this is something you can use it on your boss, on your employers, your coworkers. Every time you interact with another human being, start thinking about the disc profile of that individual. And once you understand what their disc profile is, are you adapting accordingly? How many of you have more than one child? Almost every hand goes up. Are they different personalities? Yes. Does it require a different strategy to raise them to adulthood? Absolutely. Well, that's true with every human being, every team, every committee that's making a purchase decision. There are multiple people, they have different disc profiles, and if you haven't been factoring that in, you're not selling as much as you could possibly sell.